Hello and what is up, YouTube? My name is G3Iron, and today we are answering the question, if you could only have one of the following things in the 4.0 Mega expansion, what would it be? And we asked this question the other day over the weekend, and we got a grand total of 411 votes on it. So thanks so much, and shout out to everybody that participated in the poll and gave feedback on what they would want in the upcoming 4.0 Mega expansion and what ideas they have got for it. I've got another one of these that is about to go live. You're probably watching this video relatively soonish after it went live, and so there should be another poll up, and we'll talk more about that poll at the end of the video and about the options there. Of course, you can always participate in our polls by checking out the community tab on the Good Guy Gaming page, and of course I always post about them on our Discord channel, which, yes, you can join that as well. All of that relevant info is down below in the video description. Anyway, so jumping right into it, we had 5 options on this poll, which I think was pretty decent in terms of the spread in between 2 things that people really wanted and 3 things that, like, some people wanted, but the vast majority of people wanted those other 2 things. So the first option was adventure mode or power leveling, which would mean that you would no longer be required to do Act 1 through 10 leveling, and 33% of responders wanted that, which is really interesting, and some of the comments are actually going to indicate that some people are, like, totally opposed to having that. So it's really interesting to see that there's a divide inside the community between some people who really want adventure mode and power leveling and some people who really don't. Second option was new item types entirely, like spears or crossbows, bracers, shoulders, or something like that. Just an entirely new added item slot in-game. 14% of responders wanted that. 41% of responders wanted this third option, which was an alternative to mapping, an endgame progression-based system. Now, on this one, I've got to take off my glasses and take a good hard look in the mirror at myself, and hopefully you all as well. This is fascinating that people want an alternative to mapping, because that's essentially what synthesis was. It was an alternative to mapping. Now, not entirely, granted, there are some different things that you had to do in order to get yourself map pieces, you know, inside the synthesis game. And the same thing actually could be said for Delve as well, that it's essentially an alternative endgame to mapping with a progression-based system, and it's even got a ranked leaderboard. But not everybody likes those 2 things. Not everybody likes Delve because, of course, there's caps to it. There's caps to the way how you acquire enough sulfite to actually dig deep, and then some players don't even bother digging deep regardless of the sulfite cap. They simply don't enjoy Delve as a mechanic. And then other players really hated synthesis specifically because of the endgame alternative. Now, what's interesting about this, I'm not saying, don't hear what I'm not saying. I'm not saying that synthesis needs to come back, and shame on everyone for hating synthesis for what it was. Me, as one of the biggest proponents of synthesis, I don't know very many other folks out there inside the PoE community that really enjoyed synthesis as much as I did. I didn't enjoy synthesis because of the end game progression based mini game that was an alternative to mapping. That's not why I enjoyed synthesis. I enjoyed synthesis precisely because it allowed for rares to be really good again, and it allowed all sorts of newer economy style, economic casual style players that, of course, we have inside our community, where we try to help new players along, check out and observe and really appreciate rare items. That's one of the things that I really loved about synthesis. It made rares good, not just for top-end crafters, but also for regular players that were casual players, that were maybe weekends-only players or once or twice a week players, and you could see progression in your character and see progression in your crafting through this whole synthesizer and the synthesis system as it played with rares. So it's interesting, that the whole point that I'm making here is that it's interesting that so many of the community say, hey, we want an alternative to mapping, but we've already got some alternatives to mapping. 1, the failed system of synthesis with the puzzle-like, game board pieces, and 2, the well-received, well-integrated, but still not that popular Delve, which is literally an endless dungeon as long as you've got endless sulfite, right? So it's really interesting to see that. One suggestion that I've seen made, and that a good friend of mine, Beckett the Hymnist, who is a part of our guild, and he's the guy who introduced me to PoE, suggested was like an endless style, a wave system, an endless style, a battle, as it were, where you've just got hordes of enemies coming at you, and to see which wave you can survive to. that would be interesting. But that's not necessarily, it is an endgame progression style system, like where you're seeing what level or what wave of enemies you could get to, but it's not necessarily an alternative to mapping. So it's interesting to see different people's ideas on this topic emerge, and it is by far the number one thing that people wanted on this particular poll. Okay, option number 4 was new characters. We have 7 at the moment. This would potentially add more base classes. One of the things that's cool about potentially adding new characters is trying to answer the question, hey, where would they go on the passive tree? Because everybody's got a very specific spot on the passive tree of where they start. So it would be quite interesting if they added new characters with 4.0 to see exactly where those characters would start on the passive tree. And I saw one suggestion. I wish I still had the comment thread. I don't even know, to be honest, if it was a forum thread anymore or if it was a Reddit thread. So I wish I could give some citation and some validation to whoever said this. But somebody made the suggestion, if they're going to add new characters, this was several months ago that somebody suggested this, that they do it around the outside of the PoE passive tree. That essentially right now you've got the Scion that starts in the very, very middle of the passive tree. You've got everybody else that starts kind of, around a third of the way outside of the middle of the passive tree. And then if they were to add more characters, you could have them start on the outer ring and simply add on and expand to the passive tree from there. I really liked that idea. I thought that was a cool idea for implementing new characters that would start on the outside of the passive tree ring. And it was an interesting discussion point at the time, and I thought it was worthy of including in on this poll, although only 7% of this particular poll base wanted new characters. Then lastly, there was the 5th option, which was the super duper uber shaper, elder, Izaro, etc. Did I just combine shaper and elder and turn them into shelder? Maybe that'll be a new fight. Anyway, the shelder fight. Anyway, some sort of, extra juiced up end game boss that's the new benchmark for everything. Right nowadays, builds are pretty much benchmarked against either shaper or uber elder. Or as a lab farmer, right? Like those are some of the ways in which you can gauge and measure a particular build and its style and what it's capable of accomplishing. And this would essentially be adding on a new boss for players to fight against and to test out their builds, to test their mettle. So those were the various options for people to vote on. There were a couple of comments that I wanted to highlight here because some players actually were caught between multiple different options, and so it was interesting to hear some of those different takes that they had. So Kane Chen says, I'm between 3 and 5 since 3 is about a different sustainable way to farm currency or div cards or uniques and a parallel endgame progression to maps. I do think we already have a lot of ways to get currency and varied stuff. It's just a beefed up league mechanic more. Which is interesting. Looking at both 3 and 5, which is the endgame alternative to mapping, and then Super Duper Elder, when you combine those two things, it's essentially a league, right? It's essentially, hey, something gets added into mapping, and then, hey, there's typically a boss that's associated, or several bosses that get associated with the league. So it's interesting how Kane has said, I'm pretty much caught between these two because I kind of see them both. But it's interesting the number of players who said, nope, definitely want the mapping way more than the, end game super uber duper, bad guy that gets added. Dylan Cluck said, such a tough question. Honestly, I used to think adventure mode was a must add, but now I'm not sure about that. New item types would probably just result in more unused items or nodes on the tree. An alternative to mapping, I believe he means, could have the potential to be awesome, so that's where my vote lands. New classes could have the downside of locking you into certain skills, something GGG seems pretty against these days, which is kind of interesting because a lot of ascendancies are locking you into specific skills. Just give us some new bosses that we can farm as effectively as Uber, Elder, Izaro instead of making them harder to fight. Interesting opinion from Dylan. I appreciate the feedback, Dylan, and I'm glad that this was a tough question. Like, for those of you that are like, choosing between multiple different options, good. That's what a good poll should do. Is it should give you, at least in this context, it should give you, if you have to choose one of these things, like which one is going to be the thing that you're going to choose to say, yep, this is definitely the thing I want, which is good. It's good that it's a tough poll. It means that there's interesting discussion to be had here. Okay, next commenter said, the third I want best followed by the first and second. Number 4, no need for more classes since the game already allows you to build whatever you want with any character, and the characters aren't that unique, IMO. 5, I think this would be very good with number 3 and maybe with 1, but otherwise it's pointless. In other words, it would be pointless to have Uber, Duber, Super Elder unless we get an alternative to mapping. Right, so a lot of people are combining 3 and 5, and I just wanted to highlight that again, that it seems like people want endgame stuff. Right, that has always been here. Since I first started playing PoE really heavily back in Essence League, I feel like the vast majority of comments across the board, across forums, across Discord, across Twitch, across YouTube. The vast majority of conversations about what should get added to the game is constantly around endgame. And so it's interesting to see that that's something that's still there, even though we've got Incursion, we've got Delve, we've got Bestiary, we've got the Betrayal mechanic. Like, there's so many different endgame things that we've got now. People still want more and more endgame. Okay, Sergeant Dreed said, less zoom zoom, back to what PoE used to be like when every skill didn't behave exactly the same as the rest. Click once, screen explodes. The era of PoE that I sadly missed started playing in Abyss League, but I've seen and heard from a friend who has been playing since release how much better it was, and I can see it being true even though I never experienced it myself. Sergeant Dread, I would just say this to you and anybody else that is fed up with the zoom zoom meta. I would encourage you to play solo self-found. I think that's one of the things that I'm going to do in the upcoming league, either this league or the following league, is to play solo self-found. You will feel so much less pressure. Even playing hardcore, I feel this way. You will feel so much less pressure to just zoom and get over whatever content it is that you're interacting with, because you need to, make currency and get on the treadmill for trade. Like, go play SSF and see if that slows the game down for you. See if that does anything for you. And if you already play SSF, then I don't know, maybe somebody else in the comments will have a suggestion for you. Okay, there was one more that I wanted to get to, which was Red. Red said, the problem here is the answer for me is 3 and 5 combined. Again, that dominant theme. I don't really care what the alternative system is, but I want like 20 to 30 new bosses with deterministic loot tables and maybe a few chase uniques with RNG element like Watcher's Eye or Paradoxia, which those are both great examples of awesome chase items, which when a Watcher's Eye drops for you after you're fighting Uber Elder, it can be like, oh my goodness, what is this? Is this going to be, like a build-defining thing? Or it can be like, this was a waste of time, right? That's essentially a chase item. It makes farming that boss particularly fun and potentially rewarding. It doesn't necessarily mean it'll be rewarding. It's potentially rewarding, which that's where some of the fun comes in, because there's a high risk reward element. Anyway, a bunch more comments on here. You can read all the rest of them on our community page. I wanted to once again say thank you so much to everybody that commented and participated in this particular poll. This new poll, which I promised we would chat about here at the end of the video, is going to go up right now. It should be live as you are watching this. The poll for today: if you could only have one of the following things announced Friday for the 4.0 Mega expansion, which would it be? Would you want that GGG announced that they're focusing on optimization, server stability, instance consistency, less crashes? Would you want option number 2, balance of skills, rather than flavor of the month balancing? In other words, instead of every single patch, essentially major patch, be a, hey, out with the old, in with the new, would you rather GGG actually tries to balance the game to make it such that as many possible skills are on equal or similarly equal footing as one another, in order to try to balance out those ascendancy numbers, maybe those class played numbers? So instead of having like 40 to 50% of a league playing Necromancer, like in 3.8, or 30% of the league playing Slayer or Trickster, as was Legion. Anyway, we can go back through all the ascendancy numbers. We've done that right here on the channel and discuss them. Would you prefer that GGG tries to balance things and make things roughly equal, or at least pursue equality amongst ascendancies and skills, as opposed to simply flavor of the month balancing? And then the third option would be, would you want a shared guild hideout, like a guild hall? My thoughts for this would be that it would be a guild hideout. Anybody in guild could visit this hideout, and that there would essentially be shared like guild master missions and shared guild boss fights that you all could take part in and gain progress in together. Somewhat of an MMO sort of style. Like, I know as soon as I say that, a bunch of you are going to go, no, get that out of PoE. PoE's not an MMO. But some sort of style of incentivizing content to get guildies to play together. We've already got maps. We've already got bossing. There's lots of reasons why you should play in a group in PoE. But this would be something specific to really pull guilds together and get guild play going to the next level in PoE, a shared guild hideout. So let me know down in the comments, and of course, go and vote on our community page about what you would like to see announced on the Friday Mega expansion. And I hope that this upcoming League 3.9 and 4.0, let's say that you get 2 mirrors, maybe one in 3.9 and one when 4.0 drops.
Thanks for watching that video. If you'd like more information on any of our discussion points today, you can see them down below in the video description. If you'd also like to join our Discord or support our Patreon, you can do so with the links down below. Thanks again, and big shout out to all of our Patreon supporters.